So, the Arcane skins. Shorts can be 3 minutes long now, but yeah, that won't be nearly enough. This is gonna have to be a full video. Settle in, folks, we're reviewing all of the Arcane skins, and it's gonna take a second. Starting with... Singed is probably the character who is, in-game, the least like he is in Arcane. He's one of the OG League of Legends champions, of course, and he was designed at a time when the game was scarcely more than a bunch of bootleg Warcraft 3 character models being bounced off of each other. Consequently, giving him an Arcane skin was always going to be a challenge because, Singed doesn't fight in Arcane, basically at all. He uses none of his in-game kit, and is in fact a complete reboot of the entire character. He doesn't fit over his old model anymore. So there's some awkwardness in taking his much higher fidelity and higher detail Arcane design, which is fairly down-to-earth, and slapping it onto a character model from 2008 when the game was basically a complete cartoon. There's an absurdity in watching this skinny, scrawny, laconic science man lugging around an enormous blast door for a shield and a giant shimmer tank on his back. It really does not work at all with who Singed is within Arcane, just not on any practical level. It's cute that Rio is inside the shimmer tank on his back, although I can't help but notice that they're using a cutesy version of her instead of the half-desiccated corpse that she actually is in the show, which the point of Singed putting her in that tank and desiccating her is that he's willing to cruelly abuse the innocent to reach his goals, and Rio's corpse is supposed to be a grim reminder of that, so cutifying her feels rather like missing the point. No, this was never gonna work. It was always going to look pretty bad, and maybe once Singed gets a full update, this skin can commensurately be changed so it'll work, but this is about as good as an Arcane Singed skin could possibly be, and it's not good at all. Speaking of characters whose base model can't carry an Arcane skin, hello, Vander Warwick, you look literally f*** all like anything that appears in Arcane, the show. In Arcane, Vander Warwick's face is kept more human because, well, the story kind of needs him to still almost have humanity left to save, right? It needs him to look a little bit still like Vander for his storytelling. Unfortunately, Warwick in League of Legends is a wolf furry, and the marble-like statuesque final corruption of Ascended Vander from Arcane, the show, doesn't really map cleanly onto that. So what we get instead is an awkward compromise. A bright grey, hairless Warwick with a ton of messy gold nonsense grafted onto him, and a hollow tube-like tail, which at least to me just looks kind of silly, to be honest. Short of making a legendary skin with an entirely new model, there was never gonna be any way to actually make Warwick look like his Arcane incarnation, so the skin is probably doing the best it can under the circumstances, but for my money, I just don't think this really works. I really don't think they should have done this. A character that fares much better than Singed or Warwick, though, is Professor Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger was always pretty close to his in-game incarnation in the show already, so this is a much easier design problem to solve. Although, since the in-game version of Heimerdinger always wears his goggles, his model rig isn't pre-programmed with a way to blink or do facial expressions, which means that Professor Heimerdinger in-game is just kind of staring forever without ever blinking, and that's a little bit unsettling, especially from the top-down in-game camera perspective. Still, I like that he plays his song in the recall, and in that animation he gets a little bit of custom blinking animation as well, which, thank God. All in all, this is a simple but genuinely excellent little reskin of Heimerdinger to match how he looks in Arcane. Very good job. Next up, Caitlyn in her fascist arc, which the show never actually really dealt with in the narrative. They just kind of skipped over that, which, well, that's a discussion for a different video. Anyway, this is Caitlyn taking a dark turn as a character, letting the trauma of her mother's death lead her into an authoritarian heel turn. One of the lovely animation details in the show is that after Caitlyn's mother dies, you can visibly see that she's clenching her jaw almost constantly in every scene that she's in, where in Season 1, she usually has a much more relaxed facial posture. It makes her look stern, severe, and constantly angry in Season 2. I bring this up because, she looks a bit cheerful in the character model here, doesn't she? Her expression is bright, fairly relaxed, even perhaps with the slightest hint of a smile on her lips, which, I don't know, between that and the brighter and much more colorful color palette that they've given her here relative to the show, the vibes are a little bit off from who she is in Arcane at this point. This is not helped by the way that her big, imperious, militaristic cloak from the show here is cut down to an almost sort of cutesy half cape instead. In the show, her cloak hangs heavy on her shoulders as a bit of storytelling. Her duty and her choices are weighing on her, but here, the cloak is small and light and flapping around gently, kind of losing out on the point of that part of the character design. And yes, that is almost certainly a concession to prevent her in-game silhouette from being changed too much. It just combines with the chill facial expression and the bright colors to create a really different vibe, which I think hurts the verisimilitude a bit. To me, this just doesn't quite look like Caitlyn does in the show, which that's kind of supposed to be the whole point of this. Still, this is probably the least egregious of the costume changes in this batch of skins, and since it's mostly a vibes problem, and since there's a reasonable argument that her silhouette can't be changed too much, I'm willing to somewhat forgive it. Speaking of odd vibes, this skin has a Prestige version. Again, this is supposed to be Caitlyn at her worst, the darkest, most corrupted point in her character arc, so it's just odd vibes to celebrate that by giving it a fashiony Prestige skin. Of course, that's not the point of Prestige skins. They don't really interact with the character's story. They're just supposed to be fancy fashion, and from that angle, yeah, sure, this is a fine Prestige skin. A pantsuit with shiny rhinestones, a Louis Vuitton-esque pattern designed on the cape, and some shiny brass designs on the jacket. It looks classy to me, and frankly, a little bit understated for what Prestige skins usually go for, which I find kind of refreshing. The glasses and the makeup give her a cool, sort of haughty look, which, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting outfit. I can't really see that there's anything wrong with it. Now, Brawler Vi's idle animation looks a little bit weird from the front. This is because it's designed to look good from the top-down camera in-game, and I suspect that the way she holds her gauntlet created readability issues from that camera perspective, so they have distorted the model to compensate. This is called cheating to camera in animation, and it happens everywhere. It's not a flaw with the character model, it just looks really funny from the front here. No, the flaws with Brawler Vi are of a different flavor, because all of the Arcane skins are commemorative skins, which is to say, their main purpose is to look like and reference stuff that happens in Arcane and give players the opportunity to play the version of the character that exists in the show. With that in mind, then, why did they change Vi's gauntlet? Her right gauntlet here is this scrap gauntlet, clearly cobbled together from different pieces. It even has custom animation where it rattles around, and that doesn't happen in Arcane. There isn't a moment in Arcane where her gauntlets break down and have to be fixed with scrap. They stay as they are and functional for the whole show. The show kind of implies that they're losing power and might break, but it never follows up on that, and if her gauntlets broke or had to be fixed, or if she had to get a new one, that would be a big story moment for the character. The gauntlets are an important part of Vi's character design and storytelling. So, on a skin whose primary purpose is to play the version of the character that appears in the show, why would you change a design feature in a way that implies a completely different story than the one that is actually in the show? It undercuts the whole point of the skin. It's like if they sold an official Jinx costume in the merch store, but it came with a completely pink wig. Like, Jinx with pink hair could be cool, sure, but that's not the point of buying the official costume. The point is to be accurate to the show and its storytelling, so why invent a fake part of the story that never actually happens? On the skin itself, the mismatched gauntlet adds a little bit of interesting visual contrast, a bit of asymmetry, and there's some lovely animations on it. It's not bad design as such, it's just a bafflingly weird decision to, on the one hand, sell this as Arcane, Brawler Vi, and then on the other hand, fully invent a version of the character who does not appear in Arcane. It's a weird decision, but it's not going to be the last time that these skins make that decision. For example, Survivor Jayce, a skin which doesn't quite seem to know which Jayce it wants to portray visually. It's trying to be fucked up, barely alive time traveler Jayce with his coat all torn up and his animation having him act exhausted. Like, his laugh animation is literally him laughing one time and then hunching over because he's too tired to go on. But then, it's also trying to be the final battle armored Jayce with his hair done up all nice and his beard trimmed clean, and with the makeshift leg brace that he made from his hammer completely gone. The result is that this skin doesn't really feel like either version of the character. It doesn't really feel like barely alive time traveler Jayce because it doesn't have his ragged hair, his rough appearance, and it doesn't have the leg brace, which is narratively an incredibly important character design feature for that version of the character, because with that leg brace, he literally copies Viktor's disability. It's an important part of the character storytelling between the two of them. It also doesn't have his torn up and ruined counselor coat, which symbolized the final destruction of that part of his life, all of his political ambitions finally giving way to the hero who does the right thing no matter what it might cost. And because of the mixing, it also doesn't feel quite like the final battle version of Jayce, hardened, determined, and practical, incorporating dark colors into his design to signify the dark places that his journey has taken him to, armoring up with steely resolve to face his closest friend for the fate of the world, because rather than that steely, determined version of Jayce, he's all hunched over and tired and exhausted, and his coat is all torn up. It's not the same version of the character. I can understand wanting to try and create one design that looks sort of like every version of the character from Season 2, but I just don't think it works. It doesn't look like Jayce from Arcane Season 2. It looks like a version of Jayce that was drawn from memory by someone who wasn't really paying attention when they were watching the show. The story is much the same with Arcane's savior, Viktor, a skin which, again, rather than try to visually represent what Viktor actually looks like in the show, tries to merge a couple of different versions of him into one thing, and it is frankly even less successful at it than Jayce is. It is trying on the one hand to be cult leader Viktor, the long-haired, robe-wearing guru version of him that uses his old crutch as a shepherd's crook. On the other hand, it is trying to be spirit realm Viktor, the glowy, angelic, magic ghost version of him that exists inside of the meta space of the Arcane in the Hex Core. Here's the problem, though. In the Arcane realm, Viktor doesn't have long hair. In fact, he forever has the hair that he had back when he first met and formed his partnership with Jayce. And this is an important bit of storytelling because it shows that when Viktor imagines himself, the best version of himself, his deepest self-conception, he imagines himself at that time with Jayce when they shared their beautiful Hextech dream of saving the world. The short hair is an important character design storytelling feature because it reflects something important about who Viktor is as a person and how he thinks of himself. And by giving him the longer, floppy hair instead, well, that storytelling is completely lost. The long hair, like the robes, is a design feature from his real-world self in the show. It never appears in the Arcane realm. But to match the color scheme of the Arcane realm, they have changed the color of his robes from blue to pink. The problem is, the robe that he wears in the real world in the show is made from the blue blanket that Jayce wrapped him in when he was first revived by the Hex Core. It is a blanket which, as a specific trinket of Jayce's affection for Viktor, acts as another important bit of storytelling. Even once he evolves, becomes the Herald of the Arcane, the cloak that he wears is made from the burned remains of that blue blanket, even after Jayce blasted a hole through it. It is a visual signifier that there is still, even in spite of everything Viktor says and does, still a part of him that holds on to his relationship to Jayce. It is a signifier that his humanity is still in there. It is an absolutely key part of character design storytelling for Arcane Viktor. So Arcane Savior Viktor doesn't have the angelic Arcane Realm Viktor's hair or his weird glowing body, which are important character storytelling features of that version of him, and it also doesn't have the blue blanket robe, which is one of the most important pieces of character design on Viktor as a character in Season 2. In trying to reach for both versions of the character, it succeeds at producing neither, and it manages to miss out on the most important character design storytelling features of both versions of Viktor. And it also really doesn't help that between the color scheme and the visual effects, this really just kind of looks like a Spirit Blossom skin that got lost and ended up in the wrong skin line. This is really not very good as an Arcane Viktor skin. The problems continue with Last Stand Ekko, who also doesn't look how Ekko looks during the Last Stand in the show. Ekko wasn't wearing a bright teal half jacket. He wasn't wearing a Jinx-style hood. He's missing his red scarf, which is like an important and highly recognizable character design feature in his design, and most bafflingly, his weapon didn't look like that in Arcane. In Arcane, he grabbed a floating clock hand inside the Hexgate Tower because, you know, his power is time. That's the whole point of it, is that it is a clock hand. But in this skin, instead, it's this contraption. It's got a handle and a tube and a sort of fishbones-like face on the end of it, and I don't know where the hell that came from. Much like with Brawler Vi and her weird gauntlet, it looks like it's from a completely alternate version of the show, and I have to ask, why? Where is this from? Why is this here? What are these changes supposed to do for the character? What are they supposed to add to the skin? The whole point of this skin is that you get to play as Ekko from the last stand in the show when he saves the world, his finest hour, the arguable dramatic climax of the whole story. So why doesn't it look like that? Why does he look like a character from a version of the show that doesn't exist? Why is he wearing things that he never wore and using gear that he never had? What's the point of doing it like this? Because, okay, there are different needs for character design between a show like Arcane and a game like League of Legends. There are good reasons to change some colors around, for example, or to alter the silhouette. There are good reasons to make adjustments for gameplay or technical reasons. These things happen. That's understandable. Singed and Warwick were never going to be able to actually have Arcane-accurate skins. They aren't built for that. But inventing a whole new gauntlet for Vi, giving Ekko a completely different outfit and weapon, these are storytelling decisions that say something about who the character is and where they are as people and what they have been through. These are decisions that directly contradict Arcane, and for what? I genuinely do not understand what chain of decisions led to this outcome. Something I do understand, however, and I understand it perfectly, is Arcane Gacha Jinx. Oh, I'm sorry. Fractured Jinx. Back when Riot pulled their $500 faker skin bullshit, I predicted that it was a test run to see if they could get away with charging that much money for an in-game cosmetic, and that the plan was probably going to be to introduce something like a $250 skin down the line once the $500 skin had absorbed all the outrage. I hate being right. But I do love being spiteful, so this skin is trash. This is garbage. Nobody should buy it, and buying it should be considered fucking embarrassing. Not because the skin itself, as an artistic product, is particularly bad. Well, it's not good, and we'll get into that, but because this is so naked, cynical, and ugly. This is such an obvious money grab. This is Riot Games counting on the fact that gacha has normalized whaling, has normalized disgustingly exploitative gambling mechanics, and they are so excited that that's going to allow them to charge most of the price of a Nintendo fucking Switch for a video game cosmetic. Riot makes literal billions of dollars a year. Mark Merrill can piss and moan as much as he wants about, oh, we need that money to make things like Arcane, we can't afford it otherwise, but as long as the executives are pulling six-figure salaries of that company, and as long as they are casually laying off hundreds of creative workers who are actually responsible for making that goddamn money, I'm not buying any of that bullshit. Much like how nobody should buy this skin. Now, to be fair, the skin itself is mostly competent. It's okay as a purely technical exercise. There's some nice mechanical animation on the gun, I will give it that. But also, this skin is f***all like any version of Powder or Jinx in Arcane itself. Look at its animations. Look at how it is presented. It wears a more or less show-accurate costume, but nothing in the animation of this thing feels at all like Jinx does in Arcane. Nothing in her behavior evokes that character. Jinx in Arcane, especially at the final stand, which is what this skin is supposed to depict, is a heartbroken, traumatized survivor of unimaginable pain, and her animation reflects that. Her inner turmoil, her determination, and her pain shows in the way that she moves. Not so much on Arcane Fractured Jinx, though, because all of her animation is generic comedy Looney Tunes nonsense. She respawns with a big ta-da gesture, and she rides her minigun like a hoverboard in her home guard animation and plays it like she's shredding an electric guitar in her dance animation. Even her basic run is every bit as bouncy as frickin' Tristana. And then there's the Powder bit. One of her forms is that of Powder from the alternate timeline, which the whole point of that alternate timeline is that that version of Powder never has to learn the cruelty or the violence that Jinx has to learn. The whole point of that version of the character is that she would never pick up a minigun and try to kill someone. But hey, we gotta sell a cosmetic that's half the price of a PS5, so f*** the meaning of Arcane as a piece of art, f*** the characters and what they want and how they behave, just cram some shit in the gacha machine because we gotta make some money out of this. This skin is 8 times the price of a typical Ultimate skin, with less than half of the features. At that price, I think that the least a customer should be able to expect is that the animation of this fucking cosmetic would match the tone of the animation in the show. The least that a customer should be able to expect is that the depiction of the character is accurate and makes sense with who that character is in the show. But you can't expect that, because Riot Games isn't interested in providing you with high-quality products. They just want something that looks, on the surface, just fancy enough, just high-quality enough that someone will pay for another 30 pulls on their shit-ass, worthless gotcha bullshit. $250 fucking dollars, you've got to be kidding me.